I am 91 years old. My name is Margaret Collins, and if I had died at 45, I would have been remembered as a good woman, reliable, calm, comfortable, but no one would have said that I was myself. All my life, I tried to be proper, not difficult, not loud, and not inconvenient. And do you know what is the scariest part? I believed that this would make people love me more. I did not notice how I became smaller voluntarily. If you had looked at my life from the outside, you would have seen order, a long marriage, 2 children, a house that always smelled like dinner, holiday photos, neatly arranged albums, smiles for the camera, everything decent, everything correct, everything the way it should be. And that is exactly why it was so difficult to notice that inside all that correctness, I was slowly dissolving. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, almost invisibly. It was not a tragedy, it was accumulation. First, you give in over small things. It doesn't matter to me. Whatever is easier for you, you decide. Then you begin to take pride in your flexibility. Then you call it wisdom. And one day you notice that your own desire feels awkward, almost improper, and you no longer remember when you last asked yourself, what do I want? I was 22 when I got married. I was taught to be supportive, to be gentle, to smooth over the edges. I was told that a woman's strength is in patience, and I believed it. In the early years, I felt needed, and feeling needed is a very deceptive emotion. It disguises itself as love, as importance. But if you are not careful, it slowly replaces you. When I was 38, I once told my husband that I wanted to go away alone for a few days, just to be by myself. He did not get angry. He was simply surprised. And in his eyes, there was a silent question. Why? And suddenly I felt guilty, as if my desire to be alone was selfish, as if resting without my family was betrayal. I gave up that trip. No one forced me. I did it myself. That is the quietest trap of all. No one forbids you from living. No one locks the door. You slowly stop opening it yourself. You teach yourself to be convenient. You begin to fear your own desires. And one day you can no longer distinguish care from self-erasure. I was not unhappy. And that makes everything harder. Because when you suffer, you know something is wrong. But when everything is mostly fine, you continue enduring. You tell yourself, it's just a phase. It's for the family. Everyone lives like this. But correctness is not always the same as life. At 52, I caught myself realizing that I no longer remembered what I had dreamed about in my youth. I remembered my husband's dreams. I remembered my children's goals. I remembered family plans. But mine, I did not. And for the first time, I felt real anxiety. Because to forget a dream is to forget part of yourself. The scariest part is not that you sacrifice. The scariest part is when you begin to believe that sacrifice is your nature. When you can no longer distinguish love from self-erasure. When in the mirror you see a woman who was needed by everyone except herself. And then a question appears, so quiet but so destructive. If everything ended tomorrow, was I the heroine of my own life or just the background for someone else's? After that question, I did not receive an answer immediately. I continued living as I always had, cooking, smiling, supporting conversations. But inside, something began to crack. A small crack, almost invisible. And do you know what is the most dangerous part? When the crack appears not on the outside, but inside you, because no one sees it. No one worries, except you. At 61, I stayed alone in the house for an entire week for the first time. My husband had left on business. The children had long been living separately, and I remember that strange evening. The house was quiet, not empty, quiet, and suddenly I realized I did not know what to do for myself, not for the family, not for someone else, for myself. That realization was frightening. I walked through the house like a guest. I looked at the walls, at the photographs, at the old dishes I had kept for decades, and I caught myself thinking, I know how to be useful, but I do not know how to simply be. That night I barely slept, because for the first time in many years, I did not need to match anyone's expectations. And in that freedom, there was no joy. There was confused silence. I lay there thinking, if I have never lived for myself, is it possible to begin at 61, or is it already too late? The next day I opened an old box of letters. There were letters I had written in my youth, and in one of them I read the sentence, I want to travel, I want to write, I want to be brave. I held that letter in my hands and did not recognize the woman who had written it. Where did she disappear? When? The most painful discovery is not that you sacrificed. The most painful thing is realizing that you did it voluntarily, that no one forced you, that you chose to be convenient, because it felt calmer, safer, because that is how you are loved. But love built on disappearance always leaves emptiness. At 65, my husband had a stroke. Nothing catastrophic. He survived. But something in him changed. And for the first time in many years, I saw fear in his eyes. And suddenly I understood. We both had lived our lives trying to be strong for everyone else. But we had never been honest with ourselves. Sitting beside his hospital bed, I looked at his hands and thought, if one of us had not woken up this morning, what would have remained? A neat house? Ironed shirts? Or the feeling that we were truly alive? And for the first time, the thought of my own life became louder than fear. I understood one frightening truth. You can live a long life and still never know who you are without your role, without obligations, without other people's expectations. And if that is true, is that not the greatest loss? Not money, not status, but yourself. After the hospital, I began to notice things that once felt normal. How I automatically agreed, how I apologized for wanting to speak, how I went quiet when conversations became uncomfortable, and suddenly I saw it from the outside. I had spent my entire life shrinking myself so that no one would feel disturbed. But do you know what was most surprising? No one had ever asked me to disappear. I had done that on my own. One evening at dinner, I allowed myself not to agree. The topic was insignificant, but I said, I think differently. And the table became quiet. Not because I said something harsh, but because I said it as myself. And in that silence, I felt two things at once. Fear that I would not be accepted, and relief that I finally existed. It was a tiny moment, but this is how returning to yourself begins. You see, freedom rarely begins with a loud rebellion. It begins with a quiet no, with a short I disagree, with a pause in which you stop pretending. And that evening, I did not destroy my family. No one left. The world did not collapse, but something moved inside me. Small, but real. I started writing thoughts in a notebook. Not recipes, not shopping lists. My thoughts. And the first sentence I wrote was this: I am tired of being convenient. I looked at those words and felt both shame and relief, because admitting you are tired means you stop pretending everything is perfect. And this is where the hardest part begins. When you suddenly understand that life is not over, but it is not endless either. I was almost 70. Many people believe that at that age it is too late to change, but late is only when you stop feeling. And for the first time, I was feeling fully alive. When I enrolled in a writing course, I felt like a traitor to my own role. A 70-year-old woman sitting among young people who were just beginning their lives. I looked at them and thought, they are allowed to make mistakes. I am not. And then I caught myself in fear. What if I am already too late to be myself? But then I realized, late is when you stop trying. And for the first time, I was trying honestly. One day the instructor asked, "Why did you start writing?" And I could not answer immediately, because the truth was too simple. I began writing because I was afraid to die without ever hearing my own voice. My husband once said to me, "You've changed." There was no accusation in his voice. There was surprise, and maybe a little fear, because when one person stops being convenient, the balance shifts. And this is also part of the truth. Change frightens not only you, but I understood something else. If I returned to my old shape just to keep everyone comfortable, I would betray myself for the second time. And the second time hurts more than the first, because now I already knew what it felt like to be alive. Change rarely happens quietly. When I began speaking about my desires, my children became more cautious in conversations. They listened, but they did not always understand. One day my daughter said, "Mom, you used to be easier." And in that sentence, I heard what I had feared my entire life. That if I became myself, I would stop being loved the way I was before. I thought about that for a long time. Being easier meant being convenient, not arguing, not complicating things, not expressing too much. But does simplicity mean having no voice? Should love exist only in the form of agreement? For the first time, I allowed myself to ask that question out loud. The most frightening thing is not conflict. The most frightening thing is loneliness. I was afraid that by becoming honest, I would end up alone. Because when people are used to your silence, your voice can sound like noise to them. And in those weeks, I felt that fear almost physically, like cold beneath my skin. When my daughter said, "Mom, you've changed," I did not smile to smooth over the awkwardness for the first time. I asked, "Are you afraid that I have started speaking about myself?" The room felt heavy. She did not answer immediately, because when a mother stops being convenient, the familiar structure shifts. But if I return to my old self just to keep her comfortable, I will teach her to disappear inside her own role as well. And then I understood something important. Children grow accustomed to the version of their mother they see for years. But if you change, they learn to see you again. It is not destruction, it is reconstruction. And reconstruction requires time, but it is possible. One day my husband said quietly, "I didn't know you had been silent for so many years." There was more regret in that sentence than accusation. We both realized we had played roles for too long. He, the strong one, I, the convenient one. And neither of us had been fully honest. In that moment, I understood something crucial. We are often afraid that becoming ourselves will destroy relationships. But sometimes it is pretending that slowly destroys them. Honesty can be painful, but false harmony is emptying. I stopped asking for permission for my own decisions, not loudly, not dramatically, simply calmly. I said, "This is what I want." And the world did not collapse. No one disappeared. On the contrary, people began to take me more seriously because a voice commands respect, even if at first it causes surprise. And here comes the quietest yet deepest turning point. I stopped waiting for approval in order to feel worthy. And for the first time in 90 years, I felt that I was living not as a function, but as a human being. When you are 91, you can no longer pretend you have time for someday. Each day becomes clearer. Each evening feels like a reminder. And it was at this age that I began living not from fear of losing love, but from the desire to be real. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I often think about the girl I was at 22. If she stood in front of me now, I would not tell her, "Be stronger." I would tell her, "Do not disappear. Do not disappear in convenience. Do not disappear in the search for approval. Do not disappear inside a role." Because returning to yourself 60 years later is painful. I do not regret my family. I do not regret love, but I regret the silence. The moments when I knew I wanted to say I, but chose we instead because it felt safer. I regret believing that my desires were a threat to the relationship. And this is what I finally understood. Love does not require disappearance. Love does not require silence. Love does not require you to become smaller than you are. If love demands that you erase yourself, it is not love. It is fear of losing support. And fear is a poor foundation for life. Sometimes I sit by the window and think, if I had started earlier, what would my life have been? That question used to hurt. Now it does not. Because regret can become another form of self-punishment. And I no longer want to punish myself for the past. I want to live the rest of my time honestly. The hardest truth is not that life is short. The hardest truth is that you can live it without ever becoming the main character of your own story. You can be a perfect wife, a devoted mother, a reliable support, and still die without ever meeting yourself. I chose the second role for too long, and only at 90 did I understand that approval does not replace presence. If you are listening to me now, ask yourself one question, not about family, not about duty, about you. Where in your life is there space for you? Not as a function, not as a role, but as a human being. And if it is hard to answer, that is already an answer. Do not wait until you are 91 to meet yourself. Do not wait for crisis. Do not wait for loss. Do not wait until silence becomes louder than fear. Begin small with one honest "I want." Even if your voice trembles, even if it feels unfamiliar, even if you are not understood immediately. If you are listening right now, pause for a second. Not for me, for yourself. Close your eyes and ask, where am I disappearing? Not where you are busy, not where you are useful, but where you stop being yourself. Perhaps in marriage, perhaps at work, perhaps in family. And if the answer comes, do not push it away. Tonight, say out loud one sentence you usually swallow. Just one. That will be your first step. Write one word in the comments. Not an excuse, not an explanation, but a desire. Like this video if this story made you think. Subscribe if you want more. I began living at 91. You do not have to wait that long.